Okay, I think we're going to go ahead and get started. Thank you, everyone, for joining, wherever you are, morning or afternoon. My name is Bob Martineau, and I'm pleased to be the moderator and discussion lead for today's webinar on preparing and what you can do for before, during, and after your COP participation, whether you're going to be there in person on behalf of an organization or company, or whether you're just observing them beyond. We're going to have a very practical and pragmatic discussion today. And first, want to start by introducing our panelists. First, we have Nicole Grubner, is a partner, a colleague of mine in Finn, and heads up our environmental innovation group out of the Finn office in Israel. She focuses her work on environmental technology, innovation, sustainability, health, and medical tech. She works with several companies who will be attending this year's COP, and she plans to be there as well. Rachel Barr is the founder and CEO of Climate Tech Propel, an integrated sustainability services provider that leverages social science to drive growth for climate technology startups. She's the former VP of Sustainability for UBQ Materials, which converts unsorted waste into sustainable raw materials, and she serves as a board member of the World Alliance for Efficient Solutions Solar Impulse Foundation. She will also be attending COP28, and she has attended several COPs in the past and will bring very practical advice. Brianne Chai-Onn is a colleague and senior partner in Finn and works with clients on corporate social responsibility, social impact, and sustainability issues. She works with private sector companies, but has a special expertise working with NGO organizations focused on positive social impact. She has worked with several organizations at previous COP meetings to help them establish their voice and message in an effective and efficient way. Christopher Nial is a senior partner in Finn's global health practice at Finn Partners. He's a co-lead for Europe, Middle East, and Africa. He has been advocating for the effect of climate change on global public health, and this will be his first COP conference. He works with a variety of organizations, including pharmaceutical and vaccine companies, as well as many third world sector and not-for-profit organizations, as well as some NGOs. In our program today, we want to foster a discussion rather than having seriatim presentations and PowerPoint decks. We want this to be a very practical discussion about how to get the most effective use for yourself and your organization while you're at COP. There's lots of policy issues, obviously, around COP and what the success is in the global stockade, but we're going to focus on more of the tactical and practical and tie those in so that you can maximize your experience and what you can do specifically in the next month before you go to COP, what you can do while you're at the conference, and then once you're back home, how you can leverage your experience and your relationships at COP to elevate the voice of your organization or company. In addition to this webinar, Finn is also providing another tool for you to prepare for the COP28. Each week, we are providing a news roundup of key articles relevant to the COP28 program. You can access these weekly updates that Cohen's going to place in the chat, and you can get the link for everyone through our Medium Purpose Social Impact site. And you can get those each week. We put out a series of those articles. So another way for you to have some practical advice and see what the storylines are as you head to COP. I'm going to give you a brief overview before we get to the panelists about COP and some of the basic tactical stuff for those who may have not been in. The COP is divided into two zones known as the blue zone and the green zone. The blue zone is open only to accredited parties and observer delegates. You have to be credentialed to access that area. It hosts the formal negotiations for the 2 weeks of the conference, the country pavilions, the presidency events, and other side events, panel discussions, and certain cultural events. Again, only accredited parties, the media, and observers can access the blue zone. The green zone is immediately adjacent to the blue zone and is open to everyone who's able to access the blue zone, plus others, the general public, students, and others who want to attend, but do not have credentials to get into the blue zone. Many participants have access to the blue zone for maybe 2 or 3 days, but then access to the green zone. And while there are two different areas, one of the things we'll point out is you can be a very effective voice and elevate your voice at COP, even if you're not in the blue zone for some or all of the conference. There'll be plenty of things happening in the green zone for you to participate in and relationships you can build. One of the unique things about this COP, for the first time, they are organizing the days of the conference around specific themes. The dates of the conference, November 30th is the opening day, and then they'll have the World Climate Action Summit on December 1 and 2. And then there are the theme days of health, relief, recovery, and peace on December 3rd, finance and trade, gender equality and accountability. It's a theme day around energy, industry, and the just transition in our energy sector. There's actually a day off in the middle of the conference to get everybody to catch their breath. Then there'll be a day about for youth, children, education, and skills, a day on nature, land use, and oceans, and a day on food, agriculture, and water. And the final couple days are for the final negotiations of the official organizations negotiating the outcome. Now let's get to the panelists and the discussion. First, Brianne, I'm going to start with you. Let's start in the next few weeks before COP begins. What can an organization and people do and their communications professional be doing between now and when they take off to go to Dubai that will help them expand their opportunities or elevate their voice at COP?
Yeah, thanks, Bob. That's a great question. I normally have a pre-event checklist, 10 things to do. By now, everyone should have their accommodations and flights. But one important thing is confirm your registration. So normally, you make nominations and you'll get your allotted number of passes. You need to confirm who your delegates are going to be for your allotted passes. Once they get that confirmation letter, send that to your folks, make sure they print it. You're going to need that when you register for your accreditation. And then third, I say get the logistics out of the way as much as possible. We like to create info sheets for our team that's going that has all of that hotel, accommodations, where the Dubai Expo is, how to get there. Often these COPs will have the host country will organize shuttles from the hotel area to the Expo City. This year, so far, they've posted that they're only doing that for blue zone participants. So if you're not an accredited participant and you're going to the green zone, you might need to figure out alternative transportation. They've posted some information. Put that on your info sheet so people have that all in one place. We even go as far, sometimes we have people who don't travel regularly, are coming from different, climates. We put in examples of what to wear, what to carry, even adapters, that sort of thing. I mean, the worst thing is your team gets there and they don't have the right charger and then you have to run out and get that. So get those logistics out the way. I do recommend, for me, I used to download the UNFCCC app. Different host countries, sometimes COP26 and 27, they did have an app. For this one though, it's an easier way. You're going to be doing so much on your phone to get the schedule, to get documents really fast instead of going to the website from your phone. And then when it is posted, a lot of this stuff comes out at the last minute. And but when the agenda is made public and the side event agenda and schedule, call through that, go through that with your team, try and pick out as much as you can in advance of the events that you want to attend. And, like Bob said, there's going to be blue zone, green zone, and then outside. So this year, they're also having additional events for civil society, young people, activists, indigenous people within Expo Dubai that are not in the green zone. There are also other events that are being hosted by, Reuters is having something, Bloomberg, etc. So figure out as much as you can in advance to have that schedule. And then now we're getting into the nitty-gritty of the COP. Go through your talking points, positioning, update that, make sure that your team going is familiar, even with the elevator pitch, really quickly what you do, have the latest numbers of your projects, impact numbers, geographies, that sort of thing. And I would say, no printed materials. I would say that that was a thing in the past. People would bring brochures, case studies. Now, these days, it's a QR code so that people can quickly scan and get to your materials, but no printed materials. And then for social media, you want to figure out who's going to your process. Are you going to be the one live tweeting? Are you going to be sending that information back to a team? The hashtags, the handles that you would probably like to tag if you're doing like promoting your side event with other partners, that sort of thing. I am normally usually on the ground and I put that in my phone. Either I email it to myself or put it in my notes so that it's easy to cut and paste while I'm doing everything on the go. And then also, I would say 8, capturing content. We're also the photographers on the ground. Make sure you have a shot list or whoever's going to do that. And there is some diversity in, the images that you're taking. You don't want to get back and you're going to do a blog and it's all group pictures, group picture, group picture, group picture. Make sure that you're mixing that up a bit. And the UN is great. They normally at all of these events have different areas that are, Instagram, they have like a good backdrop or so forth. Just try and mix it up. And then for the media, I would say set expectations. It's going to be really competitive. If you have a big announcement, that's great. If you have VIP speakers, that people are going to want to talk to. But I would say if you do have media friendlies and of folks that cover climate change on the regular, might be a good time to send them a friendly note. Hey, are you heading to COP? What are you going to be focusing on? Let them know who your team is, what you're going to be focusing on. If they need commentary or want to use you as a resource, you're there, just that friendly touch base. But I would say, big press briefings and that so forth, it's got to be really big news. And then 10, just get ready. It's going to be a wild ride. Get yourself mentally, emotionally, read up as much as you can. Check out our purpose blog on all of the coverage. It's going to be a great learning experience and enjoy it.
Great.
Well,
Thank you.
we're done. I guess we're done here, Brianne.
Yeah, that's right. Thank you so much, Brianne. That was really comprehensive and very, very pragmatic. But I am going to open it up to the rest of you, particularly those who've been there before. Any other suggestions that you'd offer to folks?
I would say be really specific about what your goals are going in. From a communication, let me just stick to the communications piece of this, because obviously there's a whole strategy that will go into what a company is trying to do at COP. But from a communications perspective, are you going to put out a piece of thought leadership, an article, a byline article placed in, let's say, an industry trade publication related to your area of business? The news that you're following, you don't need to read everything. Read the stuff that's related to your business. Know the reporters who follow those topics. You can't read everything. There's way, way, way too much. So, use your key terms that relate to your business. If it's waste and methane, Google waste and methane COP28 and see what comes up in the news, see who's already talking about that. And that will help you from getting lost in the sea of coverage and conversations. And the same when you're kind of searching through social media, use the hashtags that are relevant for you. Don't just look at hashtag COP28, because you won't find what you need. So really get specific with those search terms and prepare. You could even prepare a list of media who cover those topics in advance. And like Brianne said, I think it's really important to have your key talking points ready, squared away, have it in a document, share it with everyone on your team. And then social media, I'll have a lot more to say, but I'll save it for a little later in the conversation.
Right. Nicole, anybody else want to jump in?
I have some just very pragmatic things. I've spent almost the entire time that COP was open at COP for the last few years within the Blue Zone. And so it's an endurance race, but I think pragmatically for me, bring food that you want to eat, because the food can become very, very scarce, actually, especially at certain times of the day. And depending on the infrastructure that that COP is running, it can really vary. Secondly, make sure to bring really, really comfortable shoes. I wore Doc Martens and some insoles from Birkenstocks. Not the cutest of all things, but really, really made a difference. And also, then you sort of have like a capstone wardrobe that you can frame around what you're going to be wearing your whole time. So when you wake up in the morning, you don't have to think. And for ladies, that can be a really big element of starting your day. So really think those things through. I would also say, don't forget your rechargeable batteries. You don't want to be stuck at an outlet if you can even find one. That could be very challenging as well. And I would also try to get some sleeping pills, because if you are coming and you're coming from far away, you don't want to get on the ground and then just experience jet lag for the first few days. So if you can pace out and mitigate that with sleeping pills, that really helps. Those are my main suggestions. Things like water bottles, they'll normally, when you register, if you go into the Blue Zone, they'll give you a water bottle. So you need not bring your own unless you desire. But really, I think snack food that's healthy and really meets your needs is really critical. And just bring more than you expect, because people will look at you and say, oh, that looks delicious. And you'll end up giving them away, and it's a way for you to start conversations as well. So I gave away a lot of Luna bars, a lot of Luna bars.
That's great. Well, I'd add one comment too, is if you know there's somebody you're particularly trying to connect with, make sure you have their cell phone number before you leave, and trying to find people amidst the large crowd, and maybe even the hotel they're staying at, so you can meet them for breakfast or offsite and try to find a central place. And then before we move on, any other comments people want to add, or move on to the next question? Great. Well, let's turn now to, we talked about what you can do to prepare before you arrive. Now you're at COP. And one big change this year, as I talked about, is that they have these specific theme days. And in recent years, there's been a growing focus on the interconnection between health and environment. And with these thematic days, I'll see if you guys have any suggestions on how companies can utilize those days to help elevate their voice while at COP. And Chris, I'm going to start with you on this one. Could you particularly focus on that health and environment connection?
Sure, thank you, Bob. Yeah, as Bob mentioned, I'm passionate about the effect of climate change on global public health. And having a health day, I feel many additional actors are going to get involved that have never been involved with COP before. So ministers of health, for example, have a session on the health day to attend. And then that will obviously lead to journalists who work on the health beat are going to be engaged in a way that they've never been engaged before. I just wanted to mention also health is, I'm not sure if you're familiar with it, but has a lot of powerful activists, and it's really nice that they're getting a platform, and the activists really will get engaged and work on the side of mitigation. I've said to a couple of clients with the thematic days to tag their materials to show what theme it might be relevant to. So if you do a press kit and journalists go through the press kit, they can easily see what is relevant to them.
Great, thanks, Chris. Nicole, Rachel, you're in areas with some of these specific thematic days. Any suggestions you'd add in terms of using these days to the maximum benefit?
Rachel, do you want to go first?
I would say that the days are sort of are just themes. In any given day, you can actually encounter those topics on other days. So if those days don't actually work with your schedule, don't fret too much. You can also access a lot of this content via live streams. So again, if going to COP is impossible for you into the Blue Zone, it's okay as well. But I think that's one thing to keep in mind. So you might try to orient your trip around those thematic days, but if it doesn't work, or if you just want to be there for a couple extra days because there are extra meetings, don't assume that there's nothing going to be provided in terms of content that you'll be interested in. I think every single day I have found, despite being very, very niche in my focus at COP, I have found content and often had to extend my trip because things would pop up last minute. And by being on the ground, you're able to keep your ear to what's happening, and that really makes a difference.
So I have like a little bit of a different take on this, in that for some companies going, it really depends on what your goals are for going. But if your goal is business, which it is for many companies in the tech space, the thematic days don't really matter, because yes, that's the larger conversation. But if you're going in with a specific set of goals, we need to connect with these organizations, these ministries, these embassies of specific countries. Go after those goals and stay focused again, because if you kind of keep getting caught with things that are interesting, which is important, and you want to go to things that are interesting and hear what's going on. But if you have specific goals as a business that you're trying to accomplish, stick to those. My client that's going this year, we haven't even talked about the theme days. We've talked about how they're going to spend their time, how they're going to connect with the people they need to connect with, what stories we want to put out, how are we going to leverage their relationship with their industry organizations to maximize the impact of being on the ground. And then, I think if you're not at COP, then it's kind of interesting to follow the thematic days, and if you work in energy, if you work in food tech, if you work in the built environment, then it gives you a little direction of when you should be paying attention.
I will also add that those themes are also they're also married with pavilions that are focused on certain impact areas as well. So while nations can take on pavilions, so can food systems, waste, yada, yada, yada. And so that allows you to really broaden out, and as well as to very much narrow depending on your objectives and goals. But again, I think you're hearing this again and again. Know why you're going to COP, know what you're after, and stay very, very focused on those outcomes, even if it is to just develop an environment where businesses like yours can develop, which is an okay objective, but it's very different than saying, we want to meet with X ministries at X from X countries. Very different. But at COP, it's everyone comes to the same location, which is why it's so beneficial for businesses becoming, especially in today's world.
And I would say, again, I work with a lot of nonprofits, and our main objective is the networking piece of it. So we're finding out when the majority of our partners are going to be at COP, and we sort of organize our events and our attendance around those timeframes, not necessarily around the thematic days. But what I will say about the thematic days is that, I've been, attending COP since Copenhagen 2009, and we were doing, sessions on organic solutions to climate change out in the People Summit in the Green Zone, and no one else. There wasn't a lot of discussion or side events with agriculture. And to see this progress, and now that we have a theme day, is, I think, it's a signal to the movement, and that, they are starting to pay attention. And we saw kind of different milestones of getting from, getting closer to that blue to the center, being out in the green zone. And then now we have, side events in the blue zone. And then we saw last year was like one of the largest food system pavilions. Again, this year, we expect there is going to be a big turnout of food companies and nonprofits and activists and organizations that are focused on this area. So it's kind of.
Yeah, Brianne, that's a great point, that sometimes you're really laying the groundwork, and particularly in policy or advocacy positions, not for success you might have this year, but emerging issues that in future COPs may move to more central, like food waste, like health and environment connection. One question from the audience and related to this, specifically at COP, for those people in the communications and marketing world, are there things you can do to help, other than what Brianne's already talked about, from that perspective, to make sure you can hit the ground running when you get to COP, once you're there?
I think it's pretty limited what you can do in advance, because everything, like, I would love to start working on COP now, but frankly, the information around the program is so limited. So everything is really in the last 2 weeks, I'd say, which is problematic for an American market because of Thanksgiving in part. But also it's just really frustrating because as Westerners, we like to have a schedule. We want to stick to the schedule and want to execute on that. But this isn't specifically a Middle Eastern issue. And then for the last few COPs, it has been in the Middle East. This is a general COP matter. And so when you think about what needs to be done, I think following the right voices on social media, starting to really focus on your LinkedIn community. And if you're fortunate enough to have a very focused LinkedIn community, then the content around COP will actually come to you. But you have to really be in that stream, because LinkedIn doesn't allow you to really go back that easily. You have to really be in the stream a couple of times a day and see what's coming up and hope that your network likes content. In the same manner, I think it's really important to liking content on events at COP or otherwise that you think would be relevant for your network, because that's a service that then pushes up the algorithm. Those are things that I like to do in advance of COP, in addition to some of the notes that others have given so far.
Well, go ahead, Brianne.
I would just also say that, like, in this lead up to COP, you're going to see a lot of like reports coming out, stock taking, that sort of thing. This is an opportunity. I mean, if it's hitting again on your topic, your focus area, this is an opportunity to jump on it and add that commentary. And there's some certain things that you will start to see trickling.
Well, there's obviously going to be an infinite amount of social media activity, I'd say, leading up to COP, but certainly at COP, that people will be putting stuff out all day. Nicole, any suggestions on how to get your social media message to stand out or be seen above others, other than, you know, paid and pushing it? Any suggestions on
paid is very good, very important. You can be super targeted, of course, but I think the key is, don't go into COP day one without having prepared. Because if you go in day one, you're like, okay, I'm going to do social media now, then you're way, way behind the ball. So if you can spend a couple of days researching, you know, who are the KOLs that are important, who are going to be talking about COP and the issues surrounding your business, what are the organizations and industry groups that you need to be engaging with, who are the media, so that's 3 audiences to kind of pay attention to. And what are the topics that are going to be spoken about in relation to your business? And then prepare a few talking points around those issues, so that you sort of have these canned responses ready to go, so that when you're there and you see that issue come up, you say, oh, I already have something written that I can post in response to this. Now, that's not to say that you can't come up with that live on the spot and get on X, formerly Twitter, and respond or post something at the time, but having it prepared sort of takes that pressure off. So that's the preparation side of things. Also, sort of like Rachel was saying, starting to populate your channels now. If you're a company and you have a LinkedIn page, your LinkedIn page is probably going to have a pretty relevant following. So you can already prime your channel now with the relevant pieces of content and issues that are going to come up at the event. And then the last thing I'll say on this is, once you're there, if you have more than one team member there, assign someone the responsibility for social media. And I think Brianne went over this a little bit in her checklist, but, you know, what photos do you need? If you're meeting with someone influential in your space, can you get a photo with them and post that and tag them, and make sure that that's someone's job. And if you don't have that, have a colleague who's not there be responsible. So you take a picture and you just shoot it over to them. So for example, when my client was at COP in the last 2 years, we had a WhatsApp channel. And actually it was Rachel was my client at the time, was shooting over pictures, voice notes, quotes. And then our team was able to then turn that out into social posts in real time. So if you can have someone who's not there handling that for you, it makes a huge difference to let the person on the ground focus on what's happening on the ground.
Great.
And I'll just reiterate the importance of having a team behind the person who's at COP. Whatever that looks like, you can't go to COP alone and expect to have success. You need to have not just the buy-in financially from your company or your organization, but you need to have the social support of your colleagues. Also thinking about pragmatically, if you're working this much at COP, your workload's not going to get managed otherwise. So you need to also have a game plan for how to delegate those tasks, including things like social media. But if you're fortunate enough to have a marketing team, then a WhatsApp group is a great idea. We also had blogs that we created, and then we push out content. I, in theory, created a blog every day with the help of my colleagues, but that was via voice memo, because frankly, at the end of the day, you have nothing left in the tank. And these are 16-hour days, many days,
Mhm.
and it's ongoing. So it's very, very taxing. But a lot of opportunities at COP, whether you're in the blue zone or in the green zone, come from having your head out of your phone and engaging with people as humans and seeing if you smoke to talk to people who are in the smoking zone. I don't. I spent a lot of time in the smoking zone nonetheless because people were social there, and you just find opportunities. That's what I would say.
Great.
And actually,
Well-
Bob, if I can just add one other thing, because I actually
Sure.
didn't address how do you make your content stand out? Well, these are very, very practical. Make sure you're using the right hashtags. Make sure you're tagging the right organizations who you want to see your content. Don't spam. So don't tag like 20 organizations. But if there's something really specific that you're saying in response to something, tag that organization. You can even tag an embassy. Let's say like the embassy of Spain that's in the UAE. You can tag them. A lot of them have profiles on X that you can tap into, which is a great way. And in terms of differentiating content, images with people, and video do really well on social media. So if you have anything left in the tank at the end of the day and you can record a short response video to something that happened and then post that, those types of videos can get great traction and engagement, and help you get your message out, and be something that people will want to look at.
Great.
Sorry,
ahead, Chris.
Bob.
No,
Yeah,
please
Nicole.
jump in.
It's a question rather than a observation. And
Oh, no.
to Nicole, you talked about using the right hashtags. Are there hashtags specifically for COP28? You know, do people put like food security COP28 or COP28 food security? Is there
That's a great question, and I actually don't know the answer. I know that hashtag COP28 is one, but our digital team will definitely be doing that research for our clients that are attending, to see what is being used in relation to, let's say, food security. But using a hashtag like hashtag food security and hashtag COP28, you'll sort of hit both of the audiences, which is also helpful because not everyone's at COP, who you want to see that content. So I think it's also okay if you say, hashtag circular economy, people who are there focused on circular economy will see it, and people who are not there will see it, which is important to kind of bring both parts into the conversation.
Thanks, Nicole.
Yeah, very, very good. And I want to come back to the talk about connecting with people actually there, including traditional media and others who are attending. But before we do that, for some, they won't be attending COP28 for whatever policy or company pragmatic reasons, safety of travel, with still COVID. And can you talk about, for those people who maybe aren't at COP28, how they can still have their voices heard and participate? Rachel mentioned the 16-hour days. Obviously, you're not there, but there is a lot going on. How can somebody who actually isn't physically there still follow what's going on and elevate a voice through communications? Anyone want to share any thoughts on that?
I'm happy to take that, actually. So before I got into the job that I met Nicole at, I was an academic at Harvard. And I decided I wanted to corner the market on the hashtag sustainability. As it turned out that there was an effort concurrently to monitor the 100 most influential names and brands in that space. And I only joined Twitter 20 days into the 100-day test. By the end, my account was ranked just above the Rainforest Alliance. How do you do that? You do that because you know your niche. You know your niche and you get involved, and you can actually have a lot of impact online. Even though I had support from Finn and from our marketing team at UBQ, before I left in the month leading up to COP last year, I had people walking up to me where I didn't have that support of our team yet, and saying, "You are everywhere on social media. How are you doing this?" And the answer is know your niche, understand exactly the ins and outs of network theory. Now, I'm an academic, and I happen to be trained in how to make things like a virus in terms of social networks. But this is not rocket science, frankly. So read up about a little bit in network theory, understand the different types of influence that can occur. There's the ones that broker, so those who collect information, those who center, who disseminate information, and those who connect different otherwise unconnected communities. And so the hashtags that Nicole was talking about connects as if it's a street corner between COP28, and as an example, circular economics.
Mhm.
By understanding social media and executing appropriately, you can really have a huge impact without ever stepping into Dubai, ever. And I'm from Israel, and there's a chance that we won't get into the blue zone because of the situation and our security measures. So I hope to go, I plan to go, but there's a chance that I won't go. I am absolutely sure that I will be able to annihilate in the best way COP28 and have our impact area known and our messaging delivered. I am not concerned at all that I'm not going to be in the room. Would I prefer to be, because relationships are built in these types of environments? Absolutely. But if you're not going to COP, you can do a lot. And I'm happy to talk to anyone who has any questions. This is one of the things that we're beginning to work on with our partners.
Very helpful, Rachel. Anybody else want to add to that?
Well, and it's you can still tap into the conversations, and even beyond social media, you can do a blog, you can write an article that's relevant to, let's say, the policies that are helping to advance your solutions. So, if you're looking at energy transition and you're in the EV space or whatever it is, write something that is relevant to what's going on, get it placed in a trade media publication that's read by your industry. That all helps you advance your business, advance your goals, and tap into the real-time conversation.
Great. Well, let's go back to COP for those that are going to be there and talk about two different groups. First, what I'll call the traditional media. There's going to be obviously thousands of media people there, print media, television media. How can those who are there get a connection to those media folks to connect up with people who are actually physically there in the media tent?
Who's starting?
I'm happy to take a stab at this.
I'll start with Nicole. Yeah, I was going to start with you on that. Sorry, I meant to tee it up with you. Yes, Nicole, you want to take a stab at that?
Sure. Well, again, this is where research comes into play. What we typically do is we research who has covered COP in past years to start, because there's no media list. Unfortunately, there's so many media, but there's no media list. So you have to kind of, hedge your bets and see who's attended and covered and written in the past, and those who cover topics relevant for you. And then you start reaching out now. Today, yesterday, you start reaching out and saying, hey, I know you've covered this in the past, wondering if you're going to be attending this year or covering topics this year. I have X spokesperson who's going to be available to talk about X, Y, Z related to an area that I know that you cover. And that's how you start. And, set some goals. We want to get 10 interviews. If it's your first time, we want to get 3 interviews. But you'll actually you learn how to tap in, offering perspectives. It's really great if you can offer actual, thought leadership perspectives, not just pitching your own company, but really speaking to the wider conversations. And actually, Rachel, maybe you want to talk about this a little bit.
Yeah, I was going to go to Rachel. Yeah, you've been there so many times. So.
I had the benefit of the help of Nicole and the Fin team on the front end. So some of the more conventional print approaches, like Nicole was highlighting, were being employed by Fin, who does this amazingly well. I, on the ground, took a very separate approach. I happen to be a climate change economist from a highly academic background, who understands the role of business as it pertains to the international negotiations. That was actually the topic of my dissertation work. So for me, this is my playhouse. Now, if you're lucky enough to have an expert that you can have on the ground at COP, they can do what I did, which is the following. I would walk up and speak to everyone. I followed my intuition on who to speak to, but I also was tenacious. I went into the press corps, that area. I hung around there and said, hi, I'm a climate change economist. They could hear my English was fantastic. I said, I'm from the Middle East, and I'm happy to talk to you. What do you need to have answered in terms of questions in general? But I also did one other thing. I thought about what type of stories did they need to create to have their deliverables, and then try to think about how I could frame what my company or the advocacy point that I needed to be made would be able to play into the stories that I knew that they were going to want to tell. So you have people who are on the ground from between a week to the entirety of COP. They are hungry for content and different types of stories. And so you have to think creatively and reverse engineer, what do they need to hear? But I think if you're able to be friendly, I didn't miss one bathroom line, one coffee break, one smoking circle. I said hello to everyone I met. That happens to be something that I was natural at, but it's also, I'm a natural introvert. So I had to push myself and outside my comfort zone. But again, if you feel like you're doing mission-driven work, I feel like it's very easy to make these asks of people because you know the why behind it. And if you can believe in what you're coming forward with, that shines through. And I had a lot of success. I had a lot of failures, but I had more success than I would have thought.
Great insights.
The cafe is when people are having coffee too.
Mhm.
It's so much about.
Oh, one other point on that is social media. Be on X, be on Twitter, because media are tweeting, they're
Following that.
posting, and that you can actually get live interview opportunities by seeing the media who are covering. Hey, I see you were at this session. Would love to talk to you about that topic. And if you're both there, hey, you could have just created your own opportunity live on the ground.
Meet them in the back of the room after the session. Yeah,
exactly.
That's great. Well, those are great insights. And Brianne alluded to this earlier about one of the primary reasons for organizations to go is to network and find allies and partners and folks who have common interest. Again, it's a huge number of people there and can be difficult to find and build those relationships. So start with you again, Brianne. Talk about some pragmatic ways that you found people and connected with them and, figured out which programs to attend, et cetera, while you're there.
Yeah, sure. And I'll just make one other point that, there's of course the traditional media, but then when you're talking to, stakeholders, they also have newsletters, blogs. They're also creating content, web series. So we had actually some of our representatives interviewed by a partner organization that was interviewing different farmers and advocates on the ground at COP and sending it out to, tens of thousands of people. So that's another way that you can get your message out. And in terms of networking, I have my list of 5. Prep, be specific with your objectives, set expectations, and be present. So, when we go, I mean, we already know it's about the networking. So we have an advanced idea of who's going to be there of our partners. So we set up in advance those meetings. Let's set up a time to meet just to kick it off so that we know things are going to change, but we do our best to do that and kind of know, again, through the agenda, who are the speakers we want to connect with, the organizations, that sort of thing, that we want to be at their event and catch them afterwards, etc. In terms of setting objectives, and I think Nicole and Rachel said this as well, and probably Christopher, you have this in mind, be really specific too about what you're trying to do and the issues that you're focused on. It's easy to get overwhelmed. And so when you're networking, try to stay focused on your issue and those events, because that's where you're going to meet the more like-minded people that you want to connect with. And in terms of setting expectations, it will be overwhelming. We can't be everywhere at once. So for us, we know we want to, it's the coalition building. We want to engage stakeholders. We want to support and show solidarity to the movement. In my case, for my clients, the food systems transformation. And so that's why we're there, and we stay really focused on what we can do in that area. And then for the actual networking, it's really be present. We would have daily briefs where we would go through the agenda. How can we divide and conquer? There's so many different events that are popping up that we would find out through our partners. We would share notes. I would say carve out, I know Rachel mentioned these are long days. Sometimes you're there for the whole 2 weeks. Sometimes you're there for 3 days. Carve out at least one evening to do an evening reception. They're going to pop up. You might not feel like it, but in the end, just at least try and do one, because that's where that networking, I mean, it's a lot, but making that true connection with people is really important. And as soon as you get on the ground too, there's going to be listservs and WhatsApps that you can join to get that live updates. Like people are trying, something is brewing over in the green zone, head on over, there's something, negotiations are heating up. I think you should come over to the blue zone. I'm in room this, but, find a way to communicate in real time with your partners, with your network. And it's also a great way to network. It's like, oh, we have this group. Do you want to join in? Let me get your contact information. You can add people to the group. You can add people to your daily briefings and invite them to meetings. And I think, for COP, for those that go multiple years, it's almost like a reunion. You see this people, it's great, and we've kind of been out of it because of COVID. So take that time to like spend quality time with these people. These people become your friends and your colleagues. And I would say after the event, like I would do at the end of the day or at the end of the week, kind of go through my LinkedIn, all the people I made contact with, and make sure I send them a note. If you don't send it right away, like send it at the end of the day and put a time in your calendar, because you're going to want to like sleep for a week when you get home on work, but set a time in your calendar that you are going to follow up with those people.
Chris, this is your first time attending. What have you done in terms of setting your expectations for success? I know you're also working with an NGO who has exhibit space. Talk a little bit about that and how they're using that to leverage some of those relationships. But how are you setting up your expectations for what you can look for?
Well, I'm listening to this discussion and thinking that I am completely unprepared at the moment. I wanted to mention one thing. I've been talking to a number of editors, and they're still unsure, even like these few weeks before COP, still unsure who to send. So, I'm keeping in touch with them, hoping that, the people I've been working with for a while are actually going to be there. With regards to my expectations, I'm actually thinking of extending the trip. More I find out about it, the more I'm likely to want to be there for longer. And coming back to networking, I do a silly thing every conference I go to. I take a photograph of my conference badge and post it to all my social media to let people know I'm there. And I too, like Rachel, I'm a real introvert. So what I do is I'll see people speaking and not necessarily be able to go up to them immediately. But I don't know if you know, on LinkedIn, for example, if you follow someone, you can message them, even if they're not a contact. So I do that, I'm reaching out and making lots of contacts with people. But how I'm going to meter my time, Bob, I'm not sure. After just listening to the call, I'm going to have to see if I can get Brianne's checklist.
Well, I circle back and just note, and several of you have alluded to it, that you would think COP, something so formal and so big and so comprehensive, the agenda would be very detailed and set out, and you'd know weeks ahead of time exactly what programs, if you're going to a national conference, exactly what programs and who the speakers are and when they'll be there. It is counterintuitive, but that is not the case here. So I think the real message I hear is that you have to literally hour by hour, day by day, certainly check what's going on. Programs will be added, speakers will be added, opportunities, receptions will pop up outside the conference space, and to be ever aware. And like Brianne said, you can't do everything. So find those allies and partners and support to divide and conquer, and then reconnect and share. When I was there, that's what we did at the hotel every morning at breakfast. We kind of looked at what the day looked like and laid out that schedule and said, well, you go to these 2 sessions, and because there will be way more stuff than you can attend that you're interested in. It's not like sometimes you go to a conference and go, well, I can take the afternoon off. These topics don't interest me. There's so many programs going on and so many side events that you'll always find something to do. So I think that's really important. I turn now to a little bit of substantive. Most companies and organizations who will be there are not a part of the official negotiations, of course. But there are ways that you can influence policy, if not today, in the future. What are your thoughts on the importance for organizations to share their voice, even if they're not part of the initial negotiations? Nicole, I'll start with you on this one, but open it up to everybody, of course.
Sure. Obviously, it depends on the size of your organization. If you have someone who is specifically paying attention to the policy environment in which you're working, and if you have someone who is specifically tasked with that, you're 5 steps ahead of the game. If you don't have someone who's particularly tasked with that, it's a very good idea to see what those policies are that will either advance or impede your organization from advancing its solutions, and understand the direction the policy needs to go to help your business move forward and actually get those solutions out there. Because at the end of the day, companies are coming up with amazing solutions to so many of these issues: alternative energy, food systems, materials, circular economy. The solutions are out there. It's about implementation. So know where the policy needs to go for implementation to happen. That's really important. We've seen with health, we've seen with food systems, those topics weren't on the agenda before. And it's because people talk about the issues, offer thought leadership, offer perspectives, and the more awareness that's brought to those issues, they become part of the main conversation. So it's really important. If you're there, if you're not there, keep raising those issues so that they get on the agenda.
I think that's a really important point, that elevating your voice and effective communication strategy for this COP may be really laying the groundwork for future discussions and future policy decisions that you aren't measured by success or failure about whether you get a policy change today, because these things are iterative and take time. And as Brianne alluded to earlier, it may take years to go from the periphery to center stage. Others, thoughts on sort of laying that groundwork?
Yeah,
I think, oh, sorry, please.
Go.
it was just similar onto the point, just that the Secretariat also just pay attention to attendance of these events and the kinds of, and the submissions that they're getting for side events, if they're seeing a topic kind of come up more. So even, it is hard to get side events, and they've made the process quite complicated, but don't be discouraged by that. I think continue to submit your ideas, because these issues will start to trickle up. And what you're seeing with the networking is you get an opportunity to merge, right? So you find like-minded organizations and they have so many applications, they make you merge your submission into one side event. This is where the coalition building is so important. Like we saw a couple of years ago, I think France with Danone did like side events on regenerative agriculture. The crowd was out the door and going into the hallway, and they saw how much there was an appetite for this, and they gave us bigger spaces in the following years. So I'd say like actual attendance and solidarity, like show up for each other's events, come out in masses, talk about it, submit your ideas.
I think COP, unless you have the objective of signing MOUs while you're at COP, which some companies do have that objective, whether you're a major emitter or you're an innovative solution, COP is more about creating an environment where you have the capacity to do business in the future. And framing things accordingly within that light means that this is a gentle nudge, and finding opportunities for opened policy windows or policy windows that you can move open, right? In the food systems, we've seen how they were able to, over time, take a wedge and then open up a policy window. And now there are multiple pavilions for food systems. And it's a huge part of the conversation, and it's incredibly intersectional. I think that what Nicole said, if you don't have someone in-house, then you're 5 steps behind. I think that can be the case. And we're seeing with the clients that we're taking on, that it's one of the reasons why they're coming to Climate Tech Propel, is because they need that expertise to help them understand how the policy and the regime complex in general, the environmental regime, could trickle down to either their ability to raise money, make money, or close doors to them for them to do so. But this takes a long view, and it takes a partnership and an ongoing conversation. That isn't to say it's too late to bring like action to this area for this COP, even if you're not going to actually Dubai. I think that the time is really ripe, and there's no better. The way that the world is moving, and decentralized communication means that anybody with a good idea and the right strategy to disseminate it really has the ability to do so. I firmly believe that, because I've seen that with the methane space, a very small group of people, very, very, very on the edges of the periphery in terms of impact area. In the last 3 years, this has surged up with an upwelling, and we're seeing huge change. But again, it takes a very small group of people who are very dedicated and very, very niche.
Great thoughts. A final question we talked about before, during, and now after. You're now back home. You've caught up from jet lag and gotten your sleep and gone through your 10,000 emails that while you were gone. Your company and you physically have invested a lot to go to COP. What are a couple of practical tips for now how to capitalize on that? So many people go to conferences and come home and forget about it and don't reap any benefit from that. How can you, when you come back home, just a tip or two, ideas on what you can do to then keep capitalizing on your presence at COP? Rachel, I'll start with you. You're the veteran of probably the most COPs, and then.
Well, I think Brianne actually has more COPs than I do. But,
I'm
happy to take the question. I think so. While messaging it directly to individuals, as Christopher said, is really important. I find that after COP, the network that I create just by scanning the barcodes of each other's LinkedIns allows on an ongoing basis for there to be a conversation throughout the year. And I spend a fair amount of time each day, probably on good days, 30 minutes, on less good days, less. But I try to spend it throughout the day where I'm then catching content that those people are creating throughout the year. And that helps identify other conferences, just the overall pulse of the community that you're in throughout the year. And while COP really helps you get an idea of where the pulse is at, the minute COP ends, people start looking towards the next COP. So everything prepares for the next COP, and year over year, things build. And so really cultivating those community relationships means, for me, for example, even if I don't go to the Blue Zone this year, I can do everything I need to do from outside the Blue Zone. Right. Because I've cultivated those relationships. And I think that can easily be done entirely on social media as well. Although in-person meetings are always great. But it's really about just focusing on not letting the conversation die, because if you've chosen a niche impact area, then you don't have a vested interest from your corporate perspective on having that be cultivated and pushing thought leadership forward. So that could be takeaway pieces. That could also be additional media a month out to discuss, and really raising these things again and not letting things die in terms of focus from the media. I think 6 months out, there's always an opportunity for speaking again about this topic that usually comes in the form of Earth Day. But I like to do it even a quarter out. There's really good times for press to raise issues and voices. This is a great time. There's never been more press.
Right. Brianne, again, you're a veteran. Some experiences in the past of when the best things after you return home and catch your breath to capitalize on it.
Yeah, I think, kind of similar to what Rachel and Nicole is, following up with those folks. Sometimes it's a project lead, like we want to expand, we want to see your technology. Can you, let's set up those meetings. So it's really that follow through. And connecting with folks. And we have seen, more invitations to speak, for our speakers to join other conferences because they liked what they've heard and they want to, share it with their audiences. And so we've seen some of that happen, just or even the collaboration on actually other events. We've actually partnered with some of the folks that we've met over at COP, and then the continuation of certain discussions, policy areas, like following that work stream throughout the year, so that if you are planning, because then, shortly after you're going to decide, are you attending the next COP? So, making sure that you're keeping track of your issue area.
Okay, we're at the top of the hour and coming to a close here. So I'm going to give each of you the opportunity, if you have one nugget, one sage piece of advice for the attendees to boil down some of the discussion we've had here today. what would that be? Chris, I'm going to start with you. Just one sage piece of advice.
Well, I just want to say what I'm going to do. So, I'm hopefully going to collect lots of assets, photos, audio, video, and I really want to make maximum use of that. But, I'm hoping I'm going to come back and write a summary of the interesting things I learned and really, through my COP experience when I'm on the ground, hopefully that will be something people will be interested in when I get back.
Nicole, I'll go to you next.
Well, I think that, listening to a conversation like this with people who've been doing communications for a long time, it's a little overwhelming. It's like, oh my gosh, I have to research this and I have to write that and I have to prepare this and I have to know the KOLs. You don't have to do it all. So my best advice is pick one or two things and do them really well. Because it's better to do one or two things really well than to do too many things really, really poorly.
Great advice. Brianne?
I would say for those folks who are going, do your best to stay present. It's going to be a great learning experience, and also networking experience. The benefit of being there on the ground is that networking experience, because like Rachel said, you can follow, you can be on social, you can still have your influence, but the benefit of being there, just stay present as best as you can.
And Rachel?
I would say self-care.
Very
Self-care for me, meditation, whatever your self-prayer, and find your purpose, right? Above the corporate objectives you're there for. What's your why for being there? What's your mission? Who are you there for? Is that your child? Is that your grandparents? Who is that? Figure it out. It'll help motivate you, because this is a long haul.
Great. Well, thank you all. I want to really thank all of the panelists. Great discussion, great practical tips for attending COP. And we will be digesting this down for those listening, the sort of Reader's Digest version of this discussion, so you can have sort of some summary tips, and we'll make that available through the FIN website in the not too distant future before COP starts, and following through that. Again, thank you all for listening. Thank you all, the panelists, for your great insights and expertise in sharing your time and wisdom with others. And Cullen, is there anything else we need to do to wrap up?
All good, Bob. Thank you all for attending. We'll be doing more of these webinars in the future, so please keep a lookout and invite all your friends. Spread the word. Yes. And wishing everyone a successful COP.
Yes, thank you very much.